She slapped a royal guard. What happened next? Made the Queen cry. They say the royal guards of the United Kingdom are trained to remain perfectly still, no matter what, no matter the noise, no matter the insults, no matter the provocations. But on a rainy afternoon outside Buckingham Palace, one woman would take things too far. She didn't shout. She didn't throw anything. She walked straight up to a fully uniformed royal guard, eyes locked with his, chest puffed, lips curled in disgust, and slapped him right across the face. The sound echoed between the gates and the palace walls. The crowd gasped. Security twitched. But the guard? He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe differently. And yet, what happened after that slap? In the hours that followed, in the history that was revealed, and in the tears that fell behind the royal walls, it didn't just move a nation. It moved the Queen herself. Her name was Vanessa Rowe, 34 years old. Born in Manchester, raised in Liverpool, and determined to never be ignored again. Vanessa wasn't just any woman passing by Buckingham Palace that day. She was a former drama student turned freelance journalist, best known for her opinionated street interviews, her combative online posts, and her fierce belief in challenging what she saw as outdated systems. "Monarchy's just theater," she once said on her podcast. "And these guys in red coats, overpaid mimes with guns." She'd been in London that week chasing down stories about government corruption, filming vlogs in front of government buildings, demanding interviews that were never going to happen. But when her press badge got rejected from an official hearing, her frustration hit a boiling point. That morning, she woke up with a pounding headache, a dying phone battery, and one goal. "If they won't let me through the doors," she told her live stream, "I'll bring the doors to me. Buckingham Palace. The image. The symbolism. The guard. Let's talk to one of the Queen's untouchables, shall we?" She approached the palace at 11:42 a.m., just before the official changing of the guard. Tourists were already lining the square. Kids perched on shoulders, cameras clicking, guards standing motionless, just like they were trained to do. Vanessa wore a gray trench coat, black boots, and a cheap press lanyard she'd bought online. Her camera was clipped to her chest, recording live to a modest but loyal audience. Van Row TV, known for street debates, call-outs, and controversial, in-your-face activism. "Look at this," she narrated to her viewers. "They say this man is a symbol of strength and discipline. But let's see if he's got the courage to face a real question." She crossed the threshold. Not the rope line, not the ceremonial perimeter, but the social line most never dared cross. She stepped right up to one of the guards stationed nearest the central gate. His boots were polished like glass. His hat, the traditional bearskin, loomed nearly a foot above his stoic face. His posture, unshakable. "Excuse me," she said, mock polite. "I'm speaking to you." He didn't move. She moved closer, paused, raised her voice. "Are you proud to guard an empire built on colonialism?" No reaction, she scoffed. "You wear silence like it's bravery, but it's just fear dressed in a red coat." She circled him slowly, still narrating to her stream. "He's just a man. Can't even speak for himself. Doesn't even blink." And then she stopped. Right in front of him. Eye to eye. There was a stillness in the air, like the world was waiting to exhale. She leaned in close, too close, and whispered, "You're not brave. You're a prop." And then she raised her hand. The slap wasn't loud, but it was sharp. It cut through the hum of the crowd like glass underfoot. Some onlookers gasped, some shouted. One child began to cry. Security noticed. Cameras snapped. But the guard? He did not move. And that was the moment everything changed, because, for Vanessa, that slap was meant to prove something. But what she didn't know, what no one in that square yet knew, was who this guard was, and why the Queen herself would soon be watching the footage with tears in her eyes. Vanessa stood there, hands still tingling from the slap, adrenaline rushing through her veins. Her live stream comments were already exploding. Did she just hit him? What is she thinking? Wait, he didn't even blink? But she wasn't reading them. Not yet. She was staring at the guard. His face unchanged. His expression unreadable. His composure undisturbed. And somehow that unnerved her more than if he had shouted. She expected conflict, expected to be tackled by security, detained, or at least yelled at. But instead, silence. No response. Not from him. Not from the line of other guards, who continued standing in perfect discipline. But the crowd wasn't still. The energy around her was shifting. What started as intrigue and amusement was quickly turning into discomfort and disapproval. A woman nearby whispered, "That was disgusting." A teenager holding a phone muttered, "He's a soldier. That's not okay." For the first time since she walked up to the palace, Vanessa felt exposed. Not like a journalist, but like an intruder, a performer with no audience left. She pulled out her phone, preparing to respond to comments, to spin the moment as a political statement. But the screen was frozen. Her live stream had been reported, suspended, cut off. "Unbelievable," she muttered, stuffing the phone back into her coat. Just then, a man in a formal gray overcoat approached her from the side. His shoes were polished, his presence calm but authoritative. "Ma'am," he said, not unkindly, "please step back behind the barrier." Vanessa scoffed. "Or what? You'll arrest me for touching a mannequin?" But the man didn't react. He simply turned, and with a nod, gestured toward the guard she had slapped. And then he said something that caught her completely off guard. "That's Sergeant Major Thomas Rook." She blinked. "And?" The man's voice grew quieter, but sharper. "He served the Queen for 27 years. 2 deployments in Iraq, 1 in Sierra Leone. A combat medic. He saved 14 men under fire. He was personally awarded the Cross of Valor by Her Majesty." Vanessa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "He lost his son 2 years ago. Brain cancer. The funeral was at Windsor. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He stood there just like he's standing now." She looked at the guard again, still unmoving, still silent. The man leaned in. "You didn't slap a puppet. You slapped a man who's buried more than most of us ever will. And he stayed still. Not because he's trained to, but because he chose to. For you." Vanessa took a slow step back. For the first time, she didn't feel powerful. She felt small. The crowd parted around her. Not with hostility, not with hate, but with quiet disappointment. Some began applauding. Not for her, but for him. For his restraint. For his silence. For something deeper. Vanessa's face flushed. She turned to leave. But something caught her eye. One of the guards, the one standing 2 positions to the right, had broken formation for just 1 second. He looked at her. Then at Sergeant Rook. Then he mouthed something. 1 word. "Daughter." She didn't understand it yet. Not fully, but she would. And when she did, everything she thought she knew about this moment, about this man, and about herself, would collapse like a house of cards. That night, the slap made headlines. Not because of Vanessa, not because of her live stream, that was quickly removed from most platforms due to policy violations. No, it was the still image, captured by a tourist's high-speed camera, that spread like wildfire. A red-gloved cheek, still reddening, a hand, half raised in defiance, and the royal guard, still as stone, his eyes locked forward, lips pressed tight, a single tear beginning to form. The photo was titled, simply, "The Man Who Didn't Move." and within hours, it was everywhere. News anchors debated the ethics. Commentators on both sides scrambled to stake their claims. But beneath the noise, beneath the politics, the truth was quietly spreading through official channels. At Windsor, the image found its way to a private room. The Queen had seen it, but she had recognized more than just the red coat and bearskin hat. She recognized him, Sergeant Major Thomas Rooke, a man who had stood by her side through a dozen ceremonies, a man who had once knelt beside her during a war widow's private memorial and whispered, "I know what it means to bury your own." She had attended his son's funeral, privately. No press, no announcement. She remembered his boy, Arthur, 9 years old, bright, funny, obsessed with the royal guards. He used to stand outside Buckingham every weekend, waving at them, hoping they'd break protocol just for him. One day, one did. Thomas Rooke had smiled that day. His son had laughed so hard, the guard gave a wink. Years later, Arthur was gone. And Thomas? He had requested to return, not to command, not to rest, but to stand silently, stoically, for all the children who couldn't anymore. The Queen looked at the photo, and this time, she cried. Not for the slap, not for the scandal, but for what he had endured and still carried with every ounce of weight in that uniform. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat in her hotel room, screens dark, phone off, pacing. She couldn't stop replaying the moment. Not the slap, not the silence, but that word, daughter. It echoed like thunder in her head. She reached for her laptop, and in a moment of uncharacteristic humility, typed in the guard's name. Thomas Rooke. What she found stunned her. Not just the military record, not the medals, not the commendations, but the story of his daughter, Charlotte Rooke, who died in 2011 in a freak car crash while walking home from school. She was 12, Vanessa froze. Her own sister had died the same year. Same age, different cause, same hole in the heart. She found herself staring at Charlotte's picture. A young girl with dark hair, bright eyes, and a Royal Guard teddy bear clutched to her chest. Underneath was a caption. She wanted to grow up and become the Queen's protector. Vanessa's breath caught. Something cracked open inside her. Not guilt. Not yet. But recognition. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like fighting. She just felt like listening. Back at Buckingham, Sergeant Rooke stood through his shift. He hadn't moved. Not from the moment of the slap to the final march of the evening. But inside his mind, he had returned to that one moment, his daughter standing outside the palace asking, "Daddy, will you wave at me when I grow up and become one of them?" And him whispering back, "I won't have to. You'll already know I'm proud of you." The next morning, Buckingham Palace was quieter than usual. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still lingered. Tourists moved more slowly, as if they too had seen the headlines, as if something sacred had been broken. And then, through the wrought iron gates, a lone figure approached, head lowered, steps hesitant. It was Vanessa. No camera, no press badge, no trench coat, just a dark sweater, jeans, and something rare on her face. Regret. She didn't approach the rope line. She didn't shout. She simply stood, at the edge of the crowd, holding a small white envelope. She waited for the shift change, waited until Sergeant Major Thomas Rooke returned to his position. And then, she did something no one expected. She walked up to a palace steward nearby, handed him the envelope and whispered, "It's not an apology. It's an acknowledgement." The steward accepted it without a word. The crowd parted for her. Not in anger, not in scorn, but in stillness. She turned and left. Inside the envelope was no grand statement, no viral speech, just a folded page, handwritten, ink slightly smudged, and it read, You stood still when I couldn't. You protected something I never learned to respect. And in your silence, you reminded me of everything I'd forgotten. When my sister died, I buried my grief in noise, in anger. You buried yours in duty. I slapped. A soldier. But I disrespected a father. If you can forgive me, I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. If you can't, I understand. VR attached to the letter was a photo. Charlotte Rook, the young girl with the teddy bear. But written underneath, in Vanessa's handwriting, were 4 new words. She deserved the salute. That evening, in a private office at Windsor, the Queen read the letter. She read it once, then again, and then she passed it silently to her personal secretary. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, because that day she made a request, not an order. A request that Vanessa Rowe be permitted one quiet meeting. Not with Her Majesty, not with the press, not with an audience, but with the man she struck. 2 weeks later, a quiet hallway inside the Royal Guard barracks, off limits to the public. No cameras, no statements, just 2 people. Vanessa sat on a bench, staring at her own hands. She was no longer defiant, no longer broadcasting. Her voice, once loud and sharp, now seemed stuck somewhere deep in her chest. The door opened. The door opened. She stood. And then he entered. Sergeant Major Thomas Rook, still in uniform, still tall, disciplined, immovable in posture. But something was different. There was no anger in his eyes, no pain, just a deep, unreadable stillness, the kind that speaks louder than rage ever could. They stood in silence for nearly a minute. Vanessa swallowed. "I didn't come to justify," she said, voice cracking, "or defend what I did. I know there's nothing I can say to undo it." She looked down. "But I needed to see your face. Not because I deserved to, but because I needed to remember what dignity looks like." Still, he said nothing. But then, he stepped forward, and in a gesture that broke every expectation, he raised his hand. Not in salute, not in reprimand, but with an open palm. Vanessa looked up, confused, cautious. He extended it toward her, for a handshake, her lips parted, eyes wide. Are you sure?" He didn't speak. He didn't nod, but he waited. And slowly, carefully, she took his hand. Their handshake lasted only a few seconds, but it carried the weight of years, of loss, of silence, of understanding. She began to cry. "I didn't just slap a man," she whispered. "I slapped memory, honor, legacy." Rook gently let go, stepped back, and reached into his pocket. From it, he pulled a small box, the kind used for medals. He opened it. Inside was a pin, a miniature Royal Guard insignia. He extended it toward her. She shook her head. "No, I couldn't. I don't deserve—" But he simply placed it on the bench beside her and walked away. No words, no ceremony, just grace. That photo of the handshake? It never made it online. Vanessa never posted about the meeting, never returned to shouting at monuments. Instead, she started a small foundation, Charlotte's Salute, dedicated to honoring the children of service members and civilians alike who had been lost to illness or conflict. The royal family never commented, but every year, on the anniversary of that day, a single rose appears beside the guard post at Buckingham. No tag, no message, just silence. And the people know because some stories don't need to be shouted, some truths don't need to be defended. Sometimes the strongest thing a soldier can do is stand still, even when the world around him loses its voice.